David, you know, your main nomenclature is samadhi and mystic 7. Why 7? Is 7 some sort of a numerological number that was given to you? Did you just have a knowingness about it? Was it just dumb luck that you just happened to think up 7 steps to samadhi, whatever? I mean, tell us, what is the 7 all about?
Well, really it was just dumb luck, I mean, if anything else. I learned in the very beginning that I could not control any of this process. Probably the third night that I was sitting on the couch, I was getting kind of cocky, and I thought, wow, tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and visit some parallel universe or go to the astral plane and meet some master.
Right.
And when I sat down on the couch, my mind was going, and it was all active, and it was thinking about all these things what I was going to do, and I go, okay, I'm going in samadhi, I'm going in samadhi, I'm going in samadhi, and absolutely nothing happened. And this happened for about 15 minutes, and finally I said, well, the heck with this isn't working, and the moment I released, I dropped into samadhi. And I don't know if this was a knowing inside me or I was just, as I mentioned, I was going to do whatever it took, but I learned never, ever to try and control this. So with the Mystic 7, basically what I did was, after about the 2-year process of going out and finding that I hadn't lost my mind, that if I had, at least I was in good company with other mystics and enlightened masters that had walked the earth before, I started having to find ways to become established in this. Because whereas I was abiding in samadhi maybe 4 to 6 hours a day at this point, I wasn't abiding in that state all the time. If somebody pulled in front of me in traffic in downtown Dallas, I would get angry. If something happened financially, I would feel stressed and a sense of lack. And so what I did was I started looking at those emotions and those thoughts and those feelings. And what I found was that every single time that I was upset about anything, it had to do with one of these 7 things. And I didn't know it at the time. But if someone pulled in front of me in traffic and made me angry, what I did was I looked at that and I said, why am I angry? Why am I upset? And what I thought was, the instant thought was, I have separated from this person. I believe that the person in front of me is separate from myself. And the reason I'm angry is not because he pulled me over. I'm angry because I'm hurting inside because I'm living in a state of delusion where I believe I'm separate from myself. So every time this would happen, I would go, okay, what is causing this emotion? What is causing this anger? What is causing this pain within me? And it would always be these 7 things. I had seen myself as finite, that I had seen myself as a little bitty person named David Browning, when in fact I was everything in the universe. I am everyone that is driving every car. I am every animal. I am every plant. I am every star. I am every planet. And in that awareness that you are infinite, those little bitty things that you become attached to become insignificant. They don't even exist anymore. And so what happened after about, I think it was probably 12 years, when I finally became fully established in this every second of every day, I started looking at, okay, what is the process? What are the things that are helping me stay in this state of consciousness? And it ended up being about 9, I remember at the time. I don't remember the exact number, but it was 9 or 10 of them. And I worked on it for about a year, and I actually found out that several of them were redundant. And it basically just got culled down to this Mystic 7.
I see. All right. So how are you now in 2014 when somebody pulls out, or I don't know, maybe you don't even drive, I don't know. But if something like that happens, let's just call it a big irritation.
Mm-hmm.
How is that for you now?
It does not affect me at all.
Because you no longer believe in separation.
That's correct.
And you did the work of getting to the source of your anger.
Yes.
And I'm hearing you say that the source of your anger was belief in separation.
Absolutely. All suffering in any state of consciousness arises from the belief that you are separate from the source. Once you become aware that you are God, there is nothing that can affect you, nothing that can hurt you.
So when you think of source, do you capitalize source? Is
I do.
source personal for you?
Yes. I don't know if personal is a good word, but I'll say yes. It is something that it's not this ethereal thing outside there that I'm a concept or something. It is what I am. It is what we all are.
I see. That could be personal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. I'm hearing that. And, of course, you get people arguing with that.
One of the things in metaphysics that I've recognized, and again, I wasn't raised a metaphysician in the strictest term. I did attend the First Church of Religious Science for a few years as a teenager.
Oh, okay. Nice.
My father was a practicing metaphysician and a practitioner at the church. But I didn't know much about it other than people meditated. My father told me that I could control my life. If I didn't want to be sick, I didn't have to be. And so actually I never was in my life. So I did have some metaphysical practices. But as I started looking at this, what I realized was in the metaphysical community, they had a lot of terminology that negated what they knew within themselves and what they even said within their own practice. And one of them is, we are God. But then they would turn around and they would say, I am an extension of God, or I'm a child of God, or I'm the son of God. Well, you can only be one of the other. You can be either an extension of God or a manifestation of God or a child of God, or you can be God. You can't be both. You have to be one or the other. So in my perception, the way that I see everything within the universe and within ourselves is that we all are the source, period. This is what we are. And any time you say that you're an extension of something, you have created separation. And the reason we do that is because we've always been crucified for that. I mean, they hung Jesus on the cross for saying these things. And so we're very careful when we go around and try to express this innate wisdom and this knowledge within ourselves because we don't want to be ostracized. We don't want to be exiled from the community. We don't want to be crucified. And so we make up these little terms that are safe for us out in the world. But the problem with that is then we start believing that term, that I am an extension of God, and we forget, no. I'm not an extension. I am God. I am the source.
It's protective mechanism.
Yes.
Yes. So it is fear-based to think any other way.
Absolutely.
Well, I can assure you the listeners to Unzipping Reality are investigators. And at the very least, they will try this on. I think probably to find total agreement. So, again, if you'd like to call in and speak with David, you may, or you can just chat online in our live community chat room and just type in your question, and I would be happy to relay that to David. So here we are. We have opened up the realm of samadhi. We have peeked into the Mystic Seven, and I am inviting everyone to learn as much as they can about the Mystic Seven. Let's go back to what you were talking about before, and this is what really lights me up, is this idea about the conventional versus the ultimate. If you could give us some examples of that, if you've got that readily available, I'd love to hear the distinction between conventional and ultimate, because I need to clean up my lingo here.
Absolutely. We all do. As I mentioned, when I was in India, I met the monk, and when we would go on walks, one night I looked at him and I said, "You are Buddha." And he was horrified. He was, no, I'm not Buddha. But you practice every day. All of your teachings are that you are Buddha. And he said, no, 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 I'm not Buddha. Buddha is this and this and this. And after about 30 minutes of talking, he went, oh, you mean I am Buddha? And I went, yes, you are Buddha. And he said, well, you're talking in ultimate dialogue. And I said, that's the only way I ever talk. And he said, well, nobody talks like that. The next evening, we went for another walk, and I said something along the lines about how he was infinite or something. And he was like, no, 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 I'm not like that. And after about 30 minutes, he said, oh, you're talking in ultimate dialogue. And I said, yes, I always talk in ultimate dialogue. And he went, oh, nobody talks like that. Well, after about a week of this, I finally figured out to ask him, well, what's ultimate dialogue? What's the opposite? And he said, it's conventional dialogue. And I said, oh. So what I came to understand was that when we communicate always in conventional dialogue. Oh, the cat died, or I've got to go to the grocery store, or me and my husband got in a fight. So there's all these things about separation and mortality and all of these issues that we deal with. Mm-hmm. So as you start realizing that you are the source, you have to start changing your language, because then you go, well, there is no such thing as death. And if you come to the awareness that there is no death, that in fact you are immortal, that you will live forever, then you have to stop using that word. And if you're going to speak ultimate dialogue, you will never be able to use certain terms and words that you use when you want to speak in this state of consciousness. Now, the problem with that is that a lot of people don't want to stay in an ultimate state of consciousness all the time, or they need to be able to work things out at a conventional level. So they go, well, what about past lives? And when they ask about past lives, you have to say, okay, you were born, then you lived this life, then you died, then you went to the astral plane, then you were born again, then you lived a life, and then you died. But the problem with that is all of that is conventional knowledge. Even though it is a higher state of knowledge than someone who is completely unaware, it's still conventional, because everything abides within the mind of God, and there is no birth, there is no death. But conventionally, to be able to get to the state where you can abide in ultimate, you need to go through this conventional process first.
Sure. And it's not all bad.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, there's some really fun places in there. Well, let me ask you this, since we're on the subject of death, and suppose I'm having a conventional dialogue with you right now. From my end, someone dies, the people are sad, grieving around them. Do you have compassion for the ones that are in grief? Or because you have this perspective on death and that it doesn't exist, are you not bothered by their grief?
The answer to that is very, very simple to me. Whether or not it can be understood or not, I don't know. When I see any sort of suffering or pain or sorrow or injustice or any of those conditional experiences that we associate with what you're describing there, I actually simultaneously abide in 3 states of awareness. The first state of awareness is absolutely no experience whatsoever. I'm in samadhi. I see everything as thought within my own mind as God. It is just an illusion. It is just a play. It is just a game that I'm experiencing. We, as God, manifest an infinite number of experiences and thoughts within our mind. And to be able to have those experiences, we have to place a veil before those manifestations of thought. Because if every single manifestation of the source knew that it was the source, it would not be able to experience. As you mentioned, you would just be in bliss going, hey, look, that's just God. Mm-hmm. So we place this veil before us, before this manifestation of thought within our mind, so that we can have these experiences. So what I see, what I perceive when these illusory actions occur is that it is just thought within the mind of God. And so there's this pure bliss and this pure awareness of that. The other state is sort of a middle state. I see that manifestation, that conventional aspect of ourself in that state of suffering. As you mentioned, say it's someone who is dealing with the grief from the death of a lost one. Mm-hmm. So I actually see that grief, I see that suffering, and I experience it, but I see it as this beautiful expression of God. I see it as this beautiful thing that the source itself wants to be able to experience. I even have one of my koans that says, God loves to cry. Because in the infinity model, we experience everything because we love that experience. So I see that as this beautiful manifestation, and you can look at it any way you want to. Is it a growing process? Is it something that they will learn down the road? Is it some old karma that they're working off? You can see it in an infinite number of conventional ideals. But it's just purely perfect. And then I also see the third state where it's a conventional delusion, an illusory manifestation that is attached to all that pain, all that suffering, all that sorrow.
Right.
So I see and I perceive all three of those simultaneously, and I abide in those all.
I see. I like your answer. So it is about interpretation.
Yes.
Very nice. Now, I promised that we would talk a little bit about your journey to India and these holy presences that you encountered. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I've never been to India, and it says in your bio that you actually got to spend time with the Dalai Lama.
When I was working at the Healing Arts Center in Phoenix, Arizona, we were having very high teachers and lamas and mystics from all over the world come and do teachings at the center. And one time, and I never paid much attention to them, I wasn't really interested in titles or positions of power or higher states of consciousness or levels or any of that. I just enjoyed being with these people, and I enjoyed them being able to bring their knowledge to other people and share that with them. There was a monk that came through, and he did some very powerful empowerments. He was a Tibetan Buddhist monk. And I told him that I might at some point be interested in coming to India. And he said if I was, just to get a hold of him, and I could actually stay at his monastery. So a couple years passed, and the time came when I don't know. I wasn't compelled. There wasn't a desire to go there. I didn't need to go there to learn because I was already fully established in this state. But there was just this flow. There was this, it's time to go there. And I had the money to be able to fly over there. I actually went with absolutely nothing but the money to be able to get there. I had about $200 when I arrived. As I mentioned, I had 2 pairs of pants and 2 shirts, and that was it. And when I got there, I found out that this simple little monk that I thought I was going to see happened to be a very, very high lama in the Tibetan Buddhism. When I arrived, I ended up going to the Jutto Monastery. It's a tantric monastery in northern India, just outside of Dharamsala. And I stayed at this tantric monastery for 6 months in silence. And during that time, this monk, who actually ended up being a Tulku Rinpoche, and there are very few of them, and he happened to be the head of all the Tulkus. And because of his position, I was able to travel with him and meet the Dalai Lama. I think I was with the Dalai Lama over 21 times. I received almost every empowerment in Tibetan Buddhism from the Dalai Lama and other high monks. The tantric monastery I was at, the Karmapa was actually living there, who was the head of the Kagyu order. And so it was really, really just amazing the opportunities I had. I received, as I mentioned, all of the empowerments from the secret tantric societies. After the 6 months, I then went down and stayed at the largest Tibetan monastery in India, the Drepung Losing Monastery, where again I stayed in silence for another year. I didn't go and talk to people. I would go out on the streets and walk. I would eat. Every day I had my own little room there at the monastery. So they would ring the bell at 5 o'clock, and I would go down and I would eat breakfast with the monks. I had my one little bowl, and they would fill it with rice and a little Tibetan tea. I would have my meal. I would go wash my bowl, and I would go back to my room or go for a walk. I would go to other monasteries. There were about 10 in that area, and I would just sit in silence and listen to their empowerments and their practices and their ceremonies. And so I spent another year doing this, just being in silence and just being a part of them. And really, to me, it was just being with old friends. It was being with my family again. And it was just really an amazing, beautiful experience.
That is incredible. And so when you were communicating with the Dalai Lama, did you discern that he had the ability to use this ultimate dialogue?
Yes, the teachings in Tibetan Buddhism, it's quite interesting because the place where I was, the monastery that I was in, and most of them that I visited, the Tibetan practice is that of a intellectual process. They literally study nothingness, emptiness. That is their highest teaching. And so they spend 20 years doing nothing but practicing emptiness, practicing nothingness, trying to understand and comprehend this very inexpressible and untouchable philosophy. So they're very learned in this. So yes, they were definitely able to communicate and illustrate that very subtle understanding.
David, is it resins? Is it rosins? I don't know, but these are rare. Tell us a little bit about the flavor of this. Do they create an aroma? Do you touch us with them? Do we see something? Tell us what that is.
Well, one of the things that I was determined to do when I found out that this could not be taught, and as you mentioned, I am not a teacher. There's absolutely no way that I can teach you eternity. But what I knew from the very beginning was that it was experiential. And if there was a way that I could find tools that I could acquire where people could drop into the actual experience, then I was very interested in that. And I found in my own term, I use tantric as the term. And tantric for me is anything that you do using the senses to be able to make the mind go into a state of samadhi. And so anytime you can use a fragrance or a sight or a sound or touch to have the mind just drop and settle and go to that absolute silence, this is very effective. And so when I was running the Healing Arts Center in Phoenix, Arizona, we found and just basically stumbled across a book that was talking about different resins and herbs and aromas around the world. And so what we did was very fortunate and had someone there who had an unlimited budget, and we basically bought every fragrance known to man that was in this book. And not only did we buy every fragrance and every resin and every herb, we bought them from every manufacturer because we wanted to find out which ones were the best ones. And what I was able to do was I was able to find 6 specific resins and woods that are used to put us into a state of silence, or into a theta state is what the scientists call it. And so these resins, they work on a bunch of different ways. One of them is that everything that we smell, there's an association. So if you smell a rose, you think about the boy that gave you a rose for your prom. And you think about love and happiness and all those things that are associated with that rose. Well, the problem is that even though it's a beautiful association, the mind is still becoming active. It's thinking about the boy and how you felt and the prom and what you drove and what you wear and all these things, and the mind is not settling at all. So if you can find a fragrance that you've never smelled before, then there is no association with that. And when the mind perceives that fragrance, all it has is the pure experience, and there is no thought absolutely to it except the experience itself. And the mind drops, it becomes settled, and it goes into silence. So with these fragrances, not only are they fragrances that you've never smelled before, but they're also fragrances that are used specifically for putting the mind into a theta state, to actually use for meditation. And some of them are fragrances that have been used by the ancient oracles of Greece. They've been used by shamans 5,000-10,000 years ago. And so their purpose is to actually do this. And so when we burn these fragrances, these resins, we are able to go into a very, very deep state of samadhi. And I've been able to do this with people who are drinking, who are smoking, who are doing drugs. And when we burn these fragrances, they are able to drop into this state of samadhi. And when I see that it can do that to them, I knew that it could do it to anybody. And I've used this over and over and over again. And every time, again, without exception, people are able to go into a state of silence.